So let's move away from Calcutta for a moment and talk briefly about your time as a foreign correspondent during the emergency and during the years with Indira Gandhi. What were your
Well, I never felt it would go the way of Pakistan. I mean, first of all, when I first came, there was the very last months of the emergency, so I was not, I wasn't here for a lot of the emergency at all. Two things will always come up in the emergency. One is enforced sterilisation, which undoubtedly happened, and the other is the demolition of the slums of Kashmir in Delhi and the forcible removal of the population to new settlements. Those are the things that can really be held against it. Plus, I suppose, self-censorship by the press. Not all of the press, but most of it. Because I didn't know what it had been like when it wasn't under an emergency,
right.
It didn't seem to me to be a kind of abnormal condition for India to be in. People could have conversations about the emergency, about Mrs. Gandhi. I didn't feel particularly oppressed as a foreigner here. In fact, one of the great things I must say about India, generally, for a reporter, is its remarkably open and welcoming society, much more so than any other country I think I've ever been in as a reporter. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think including my own country.
Right.
So that, I can see now, what wasn't the thing it later became. It was less welcoming, less open, obviously, in the emergency. But I never really felt that the place had kind of knuckled under in any way at all. People still made jokes about Mrs. Gandhi. Kind of the things you noticed, really, I suppose, looking back, was the slogans on the sides of buses about family planning. Mm-hmm. Hotels always had a picture of Mrs. Gandhi about the reception desk. But actually, as a kind of dictator or an autocrat, whatever you want to call her, I don't think she was too convincing, really. Mm-hmm. I really don't. And it's very difficult to be autocratic in India. It's much too complicated a place to try and enforce iron discipline. So I didn't feel oppressed by the emergency. Of course, I wasn't the man who was about to be sterilised against his will. Right. I wasn't the slum dweller in Delhi. So why should I feel it unnecessarily? But no, I think in retrospect, I think it's gained more kind of, it's gained a kind of patina of horribleness which it didn't actually have at the time.
Right. And you were here during the 80s when Indira Gandhi she returned to power and faced a crisis in Punjab.
Yes.
And many would say that that could have been handled better.
Yeah, and they may well be right. I mean, they may well be right about that. I didn't find out enough to know that. It seemed to me she was in a pretty horrible position. I mean, the accusation that she'd fostered Bhindranwale, the Sikh militant, that she'd fostered him for domestic political reasons in Punjab, and now he'd kind of grown loose, he'd been set free.
Frankenstein's monster.
Exactly.
Yes.
I kind of accept that. But what she could have done once she was in the Golden Temple, I don't know, I'm not qualified to say. I think what happened after she was shot was terrifying. In a way, the emergency was never terrifying. Because it suddenly felt a great eruption of communal hatred, which I'd never witnessed before in India.
Those of us who were abroad at the time couldn't believe it, and we couldn't believe the reaction her son had come to power, and his reaction when asked about it was, when a big tree falls, what is it?
When a great tree falls, the earth shakes.
The earth shakes, exactly. And at that time, many of the same voices who were talking about, what happened in Gujarat, focusing on that and correctly pointing out that this kind of thing should not happen in a pluralistic society, were silent during that time. My own personal reflection on it is that because this was Congress's intolerance, it was seen as less intolerant than
Yes,
someone, you know, it was secular intolerance. I mean, it was really, you know, it was revenge is what it was.
Yes, well that's very true, they did break it. And by and large, I think the law and order structures in Delhi and the days after Mrs. Gandhi's assassination were on the side of the rioter rather than anybody else's side. I think that's probably true. And it was a very strange period. I mean, people that had known one person I knew very well, who'd been a friend, he was a government officer. He was absolutely convinced that there were, trains coming into Delhi with bodies on board that had been massacred by Sikhs, which was a kind of partition. It was a story from partition when it actually had happened, but it certainly was a thing that was believed to be happening in 1984. Of course, it wasn't happening. So it was a time of kind of very vivid and incendiary rumour. And you suddenly saw, not just as it applied to India, but as it applied to Britain even, which is always had to be a more stable country, that it wouldn't take much for kind of societies just to crumble. I mean, India did not crumble. It pulled itself together remarkably, I think, after that, and it stopped pretty quickly. And that was a sign of something about India, I think, a sign of resilience in India. But it certainly showed how these things could easily go off the rails. Yeah,
yes. This story has recently come in the news because of the allegation that Margaret Thatcher's government was somehow advising the Indian government or participating in an advisory capacity to the military.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think it matters actually. It's a very unfashionable thing for a journalist to say.
You're right.
I don't think it actually matters very much. I mean, well, of course the government of India, if Britain had a specialism in a certain kind of anti-terrorist operation, then why wouldn't you ask them what their opinion was, or would you have any advice? And of course you would. So I think the idea that this is a terrible business because Sikhs or Khalistanis in Britain will feel upset and angered. Well, I wonder how many. I mean, the Khalistani movement hardly exists, as far as I'm aware, in Britain or in India. So I think it's something that's been kind of flamed up by journalism. I really don't think it's all that important. I mean, the British government gave advice to the Sri Lankan government, I'm sure. I mean,
so you think David Cameron's overreacting?
Yeah, I thought he did really overreact. But politicians have to overreact, as we noticed, and because the news cycle is so relentless, they have to have opinions on everything quickly. It's very dangerous for politics. I mean, Cameron is easily forced into kind of ridiculous positions. The whole business with Sri Lanka, which he said, Sri Lanka would be punished unless he would himself, Cameron would himself initiate kind of UN inquiries into what had happened in the north of the island at the end of the war, unless Sri Lanka. And I thought, well, you should actually shut up here, because actually Britain does not have any kind of heft in the world anymore to make that kind of statement. And I think actually in British politics, the mistake is often made to imagine that they have some kind of moral weight in the world, greater than other countries of similar sizes. And I don't think that's probably true anymore.
Well, he did. He went to the north of Sri Lanka, to the Tamil regions, and which was seen as I'm sure it was encouraging to the Tamils, and it certainly sent a message that I'm here to. I want to be kind of a mediator in a sense,
I would say domestic television audience played a big part there, and was quite a substantial Tamil population in Britain. So for those reasons, it would be a good thing for him to do. When he went to China recently. He made no remark about the Dalai Lama. He wouldn't see the Dalai Lama. Yeah. So, and I don't blame him for this. Striking a moral attitude is a difficult thing for a country to do if it has no economic power, which is the truth.
Yeah.
So I think eventually this dawn on him that he can't strike too many moral attitudes.
But I think clearly he's taking his cue from what happened with the Labour government. I mean, Tony Blair was, immensely popular until the Iraq War, and the majority, I think, of British people were opposed to it. And I was actually in the UK when Tony Blair was, he was trying to explain his position in front of talk shows, and I was surprised by the open hostility to him. He was being called all kinds of names. Someone came up and said, with the right honourable, Vice President of the United States. Really kind of something that I wouldn't have expected.
He became hated.
Yes, he did.
I'm not far from that position myself. I have to tell you.
Yes.
I think his decision. And it was really his decision. I think many other people wanted it to happen, to go along with George Bush and invade Iraq. It was a disastrous one for British politics and the position really of Britain in the world. And I think it was a huge, huge mistake, and it's cost a lot of lives.
Yes, it does.
And I think you're right. I think hated is not too strong a word. I think he's very, very much hated by quite a large number of people. Time and again you find the kind of, but also because, just go back to it, also because Britain has changed. I mean, Britain is a much more multiracial, multicultural country now. So just to say we're going to invade a country which perhaps is a Muslim majority isn't the kind of easy thing it was. You have to have recruits in an army.
Right.
And military decisions really require at least the kind of feeling that the whole country is supporting. I think that's going to be really difficult in terms of a place like Afghanistan, which Britain is withdrawing from anyway, so that perhaps won't matter. But it has caused a lot of tension inside England between Muslims, Muslim minority, and everybody else.
Well, the Muslim minority is quite large in them.
It's great. It's sizable inside certain towns and cities, of course. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So that's a tricky thing now. And I think Britain just cannot afford anymore to indulge in moral postures abroad, which involves armies. I just think it can't afford to do it. I mean, Libya was expensive. Afghanistan is very expensive, both in terms of finance and money, finance and blood, because a lot of people die now. So these things have become very unpopular. And I think people used to call Blair, there's quite a clever piece written about Blair by a New Yorker writer, and he said that Blair was the first post-colonial, post-imperial British Prime Minister. And one could see what he meant, because Thatcher, Major, had all grown up really with Churchill, and memories of Churchill in the war. But he turned out not to be post-imperial, he turned out to be rather imperial.
Yes.
So I think now, paradoxically, although Cameron's a conservative, I think he may be the first post-imperial Prime Minister.